Welcome back to CBS News 24/7. I'm Reed Cowan. So we begin this hour in Mar-a-Lago, where President-elect Donald Trump just finished taking questions from reporters on, quite literally, dozens of topics. Here he is moments ago talking about a decision that allowed Ukraine to fire U.S.-made long-range missiles into Russia.
I don't think they should have allowed missiles to be shot 200 miles into Russia. I think that was a bad thing. And that brought the Koreans in, North Korea, another man I get along with very well. I'm the only one that does. But that did a lot of bad things. I don't think that should have been allowed. Not when there's a possibility, and certainly not just weeks before I take over. Why would they do that without asking me what I thought? I wouldn't have had them do that. I think that was a big mistake they made.
Will you reverse that decision when you're in office to let those
I might, yeah.
missiles be
I thought it was a very stupid thing to do.
All right, CBS News politics coordinator Zak Hudak joins us now for more. Your reaction, it sounds like the president-elect not really wanting to tip his hand on what he would do on any international matter whatsoever.
Reed, I think in large part that is correct. I think that he's in a stage here where he does not yet have the power. He's in a state where he can be meeting with foreign diplomats and can actually be behind the scenes making some moves, but he can't really do anything yet. So to reveal exactly what his plans or his administration's plans are going to be would in fact be, showing his hand to our adversaries and even to our allies who themselves we might not want to share our long-term plans with. So I think you're right. I think that is very calculated. And I think even when we do get hints on what his foreign policy will be like, I think we need to take those hints as actual chess moves. He is putting information out there in order to see how our allies and adversaries react to it.
All right, so let's come home to some domestic matters. We also heard Mr. Trump's comments on Human Services Secretary pick Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Let's go ahead and play some of what he had to say here.
No, I think he's going to be much less radical than you would think. I think he's got a very open mind, or I wouldn't have put him there. He's going to be very much less radical. But there are problems. I mean, we don't do as well as a lot of other nations, and those nations use nothing. And we're going to find out what those problems are. And another thing that came up, the dinner was fascinating because I had Bobby and I had, again, the head of Pfizer. You know who that is. He's a highly respected man who has run an incredible company. Likewise with Lilly, the top two people. And we had the head of the industry also. So all companies were represented. And I said, let's have it out now a little bit. And you know what came out of that meeting is that we're paying far too much because we're paying much more than other countries. And we have laws that make it impossible to reduce. And we have a thing called the middleman. You know the middleman, right? The horrible middleman that makes more money, frankly, than the drug companies, and they don't do anything except they're a middleman. We're going to knock out the middleman. I'm going to be very unpopular after that statement.
President.
So, Zach, a lot of people watching this, especially our senior population, they are literally, in some cases, choosing their medicine over their next meal. I would imagine what they heard by way of cutting out the middleman gave some hope. What does the president-elect mean by the middleman when he talks about Pfizer and Eli Lilly?
He is talking about finding a way for these patients to directly purchase the medicine they need from the companies manufacturing it, not dealing with the middleman of an insurer and these other folks who have to okay the purchase. I think what's particularly interesting about the sort of odd couple of Donald Trump and Robert Kennedy Jr. is that Robert Kennedy Jr. is a guy who was frankly born into the establishment, the son of Robert Kennedy. And he has over the years become more and more anti-establishment and is sort of an iconoclast. He's fighting against what is typically thought to be the norm here. Donald Trump, on the other hand, is someone who really began his political career as the ultimate outsider, as a guy who was saying he was going to drain the swamp. But in many ways, now, more than a decade later, he has frankly become the Republican establishment. The Republican Party is in line with him. So it creates this interesting tension where there's a guy, Robert Kennedy, who Donald Trump is probably inclined to cozy up to. He sees him as a fellow outsider. But the reality is, over time, Donald Trump has, in a lot of ways, become an insider. So I'm particularly interested to see how that dynamic between those two plays out over the next few years.
Right, and when you mention falling in line with him, that raises another question. You know, we're very close to confirmation hearings. Speaking to falling in line, the president-elect talked about the possibility of primarying people who don't agree with him. How should the American people read that?
Well, I think this is how Donald Trump has long functioned in politics. If you come for him, you better be ready for him to come back at you. He has done that on Capitol Hill as long as he's been in politics. I think a good example of someone whose career really came crumbling down because of failure to stay in line with Trump. That would be, one of them would be Kevin McCarthy. He was a Trump ally, but as far as Trump was concerned, not closely aligned enough and not loyal enough. And he ended up losing his speakership, which he had spent his life fighting to get. On the other hand, you could look at someone like Liz Cheney, who came out strongly against the former president after January 6th, actually stood on the Jan 6 Select Committee, and she went from being the number 3 Republican in the House to losing her seat altogether. So it is dangerous if you're a Republican to start a fight with the president or to even do something that he perceives as being slightly disloyal, which could be something as small as not voting for one of his picks for his administration.
Right, and that looks at it from the perspective of the lawmaker deciding on how much they want to go toe-to-toe with the president-elect. But also, for those cabinet picks, does that embolden them to go toe-to-toe with lawmakers a little bit more, feeling like, hey, if they come against me, this person could be primary?
Reed, I think that's exactly right. I think that's a great way to look at it. These picks are now an extension of President-elect Trump. They are part of his ideal administration in his mind. So when you're attacking them or when you're failing to support them, you are failing to support him. So that is exactly right. They are shielded by that and an extension of him, which allows them, as you said, to be emboldened to, in fact, push back on some of the members of Congress if they are having trouble getting them through, and to even publicly speak out about the members that they're having trouble with. So that's absolutely right. It gives them a strength they would not otherwise have.
Zak Hudak, CBS News politics coordinator. Nice to talk to you on a Monday. I have a feeling you'll be back very soon here on CBS News 24/7.